Hello everyone, welcome back to the Good Bit Podcast. Thank you very much for tuning in this week. We have another exciting edition of the podcast for your ears this week. Can you believe it? I am absolutely buzzed about this week's edition. Finally, someone has selected maybe my favourite movie of all time, Steven Spielberg's Jaws from 1975. And I'm joined this week by film director Brad Watson. Brad, we're doing Jaws today, and I say that because the last few weeks we've done a few that I haven't been too familiar with. We did one called Raise Your Voice a couple of weeks ago, never heard of it. We did one last week called Practical Magic, which was new to me from the 90s.
Isn't that the Griffin Dunn directed movie?
I think so, yeah. It's Sandra Bullock and Nicole Kidman.
Yeah, I believe, I might be wrong, someone might have a go at me. I think Griffin Dunn, who Jack from American Wolf in London, I believe he done it.
So that was like a nice kind of spooky Halloween themed episode last week. So now we're chatting about Jaws, which, as I said millions of times on the podcast and through my history doing videos and production, things like this, it's always one of my favorite movies. So I'm delighted that you're here, Brad. How are you today? Welcome to the show.
I'm good. I'm fine, thank you. In fine voice, as you just heard me interrupt you there in your intro.
No. Listen, I'm used to being interrupted on the show, so getting in contact with you is really interesting because usually I'm speaking to fellow actors on the show, but as a director, I can imagine that you're kind of looking at films differently than maybe I would or anybody else. When did that kind of become a thing for you where you wanted to be a director? Did you ever consider acting or performing, or was it always like a behind the scenes kind of aspect you wanted to do?
I never considered acting.
No.
But you have to kind of do it a little bit as a director, because you've got to talk to actors and you've got to communicate with them. So you've got to, so I'm always acting on set with my actors and playing the scenes with them or giving them if we're on a tight schedule and I need to just perform how I need it to go, do that. You try not to do that, of course, but everyone knows sometimes overtime's about to kick in. I'm like, just say it like this. But those are the extreme situations. In general, you've got to understand the actor's plight, as it were, and what it's like to have that lens pointing at your face, knowing that it's you that's going to be up there. So I've always got a massive respect for the actors on that sense, and I like talking with actors, like communicating with them, like doing all that. But I am definitely I guess what you would call a craft film director. I'm what they term a shooter, I guess. When I walk on the set, I know pretty much what lens I want to use. I know what the camera's going to do, and I block a scene with the camera in mind. To me, it's all one whole piece of the jigsaw puzzle. So that. Probably unsurprising because of the movie we're gonna chat about. My epiphany happened at the age of 8, and it happened when I'd been watching at that time. At the age of 8, my favorite movies were, apart from Star Wars, my favorite movies were Jaws, Close Encounters of the Third Kind, and Raiders of the Lost Ark. Having no idea that the same guy made those 3 movies. Right. And when I was about to watch E.T. for the first time, my dad just off the cuff just went, this is made by the same guy that made Jaws, Close Encounters, and Raiders of the Lost Ark. And that, my mind exploded. That completely blew my head off, as it were. And suddenly the whole concept that movies were made, and not just made, they're made by a person, and they're not just made by a person. This person has, obviously this is me in hindsight, figuring out what my 8-year-old brain was doing. But, at that time, all I could think is, I want to do that. What he does, what this Spielberg guy does, I want to do that because, I don't know, this affects me. I was obsessed with those movies. And, and it was just that linking together blew my mind so even though I probably didn't understand what a director did at that time, I knew I wanted to be a film director. I wanted to do what that guy does. Yeah. And then the rest of my life has been in pursuit of that. that one thing.
Listen, you look back on these classic films like Raiders and things like that, and it's, they're just part of civilization, right? They're just part of your life.
Yeah.
Sometimes you forget, like, someone had to, like, okay, what we're going to do here, and think about each individual shot. When you see movies these days, sometimes I'm like, I can't believe someone made this. The most recent example of that is that Everything Everywhere All at Once.
Yeah.
I don't know if you saw that one, but
sorry,
it just got so much kind of praise around the world and stuff. And I was like, I'm sure it's good and stuff. The trailer looks kind of funny. So I went to see it. And although I loved the story and I loved the film and kind of what they did with it, it was more so, how did someone come up with this?
Yeah, exactly. It was a wonderful imagination, and it's this, not to sound too much like a grumpy old man, but it's rare to come across movies like that these days, especially ones that get a good release, where you feel a direct. Because I love the movies because of my Spielberg love and the kind of movies I love. I love the movies where you can feel a director's hands guiding you through the movie, guiding you through the story, taking you this way. That's why, when you find out as a kid, when I, who I knew who Spielberg was, then you find out who his influences are, and then you start watching Hitchcock, and then you start watching Powell and Pressburger and Orson Welles, and then French New Wave, and you start seeing. Oh, this is, and then you go even further back, to Chaplin and all
Buster
that.
Keaton and things. Yeah,
exactly. And they all fed into each other. They all fed into each other. It was great. Hollywood and the French and that it was a symbiotic thing, which you didn't realize at the time. But looking back, you can see just the formulation of this language of cinema that we love and that reached, I think, a pinnacle. I would call it a pinnacle in terms of the getting the balance between the creative art of filmmaking and storytelling and the commercial aspect of it in sync and in balance. For me, it was that golden period of Jaws onwards until sort of the mid 90s, I guess. I mean, I guess maybe it's going all the way up to things like Apollo 13 and stuff like that. Which is again a movie that and I'm a Ron Howard defender. I think that he's made some movies that are really, really well directed, and Apollo 13 is certainly one of those. And but they were just movies that they punctured the culture, as well as being brilliant examples of visual storytelling. And that was a period that was magical for me. And I was so privileged. I feel to have grown up in that time. Yeah. But I was very, very careful to be aware of where that all came from and where their influences were. And it was wonderful to go back and watch Citizen Kane, and literally see all your favorite directors, literally see where Spielberg, where Scorsese, where De Palma, literally see where they got their ideas from, or see the evolution of that kind of filmmaking. And and it's wonderful. And then, like I said, then you can go back even further and you can see it happening. These guys, once they figured out this camera, not only could this camera record stuff, but it could move about, and then the way you moved it would cause an effect. Once that clicked, they were up and running, and the art form of the 20th century couldn't be stopped from that moment on.
Absolutely. You can tell a story in that way, You mentioned Citizen Kane. The first time I saw that film was when I was at drama college, and our lecturers added on this extra kind of qualification that we could get. It was called film theory. And every Wednesday night we would go to this kind of like amphitheatre that was at the college, and we'd watch a film, and the very first film ever chosen by this course was Citizen Kane. So that was the first time I watched it, and we saw it in this big amphitheatre thing. So it was a great experience, but years ago. So like I've not watched it again. So I'd love to kind of get back to Citizen Kane. That'd be a good one to revisit.
Absolutely, it's great. And I would also suggest anyone that's interested in that stuff and seeing the filmmakers that really pioneered stuff. Watch Powell and Pressburger movies, because they the Red Shoes and A Matter of Life and Death and Life and Death of Colonel Blimp and all that. They are, and you've got to keep in your head and what the equipment was like that they used. The size of these cameras and all that, and they are pulling off beautiful crane jibbing shots, going from here up there, going following people in a theater, running up to the dress circle and coming in on a, you know, it's
right.
It's great, you know, and you see, and those things are still influence. I mean, what's his name? Who directed Black Swan? You know, he just completely,
right,
you know, homaged, shall we say, the Powell and Pressburger's Red Shoes in that movie. I mean, a lot. There's a lot of shots. That whip panning, you know, when she's spinning and whip pans like that, you know, totally taken from Powell and Pressburger back, you know, decades earlier, you know.
Yeah.
So it's and which is great, which is fine. But I just think it's fun and enlightening to look back and see where a lot of this stuff came from.
Yeah, I really kind of get into that stuff, especially when I was at drama college, just like being obsessed with the films and looking back and kind of learning about them and finding out trivia and stuff, you know, to the point where, you know, if you're doing like a film quiz or something, you know, like your specialist subject would maybe be like an era of that time, you know. I think I'm quite good at watching older films and appreciating them for what they are. So, for example, going to see, you know, classics in the cinema, for example, they just showed the original Star Trek film in the cinema, which I got to see on the big screen, which was like mind-blowing for me because I'd never get a chance to see that in the cinema, you know. So having that there was really good. And then also saw the Wrath of Khan as well.
Yeah, I was there for those.
Yeah, you enjoy?
Oh yeah, I mean, they're showing them. Yeah, they're showing them all. I mean, all the movies, you know, I've been watching. I mean, I've been posting every time I go and see them because I'm just so elated to see these movies on the big screen again. And it's you know, it just shows that this era, because it basically, I mean, there's a lot of movies from 1982 going out at the moment. 1982 was a stellar year, or the summer of '82, where you had, you know, where you had Wrath of Khan, you also had E.T., you had The Thing, you had Poltergeist, you had Mad Max 2, you had you know, you had so many things. Blade Runner, you know, it was 1982 was a crazy summer. And it's the 40th anniversary of all those movies. So it's great seeing them all come out. And the other thing that's going on right now, just to indulge my love of the nostalgia kick we're getting at the moment, is if you'd asked 14-year-old Brad, what's the most amazing thing that could ever happen that would never happen? You know, like what would be your dream thing that you know would never happen? I probably would have said to watch my favorite movies with a full orchestra doing the score live. Well, I pretty much go 2 or 3 times a year now to the Royal Albert Hall and see, you know, you've seen them all, you know, E.T., Close Encounters, Jaws, and you know, everything. It's a great time that people are realizing how special that era was right now, which is fantastic.
Yeah, nostalgia is such a big thing right now, you know, looking back on the kind of glory days and stuff. What about things you're watching just now? Have you got any TV shows kind of on rotation just now that you can recommend? Or even like the last thing you watched? Or films?
At the moment, I'm not really... Unfortunately, I've dipped my toe in a couple of things that have upset me. So I didn't...
Got you.
And the thing is I don't have much time to like watching TV shows and series. Of course. I don't have much time. But I tell you what I watched pretty much all of a while back, and you know it's been around for a while. But I'd never seen The Good Place.
Okay.
And I don't know if you've ever seen that. And I found it wonderful. Yeah. I found it absolutely wonderful. I thought Ted Danson was great, and I thought the concept was really, really cool, and it went places. It did this concept, but it really kind of mined it for fun. You know, I think it probably just about outstayed its welcome and was ready to go. But again, kudos to them because they finished it at whatever season it was, 4 seasons, and didn't go any further. And it felt like it was running out of steam. You know, whereas as opposed to a lot of seasons or shows, or particularly the, you know, sort of like the mid 2000s onwards, we had all these shows that just wouldn't die,
right?
Just kept going on and on, you know. And there's shows that started off really well, but then you just sort of lost interest, or they dramatically fell off at the end. Things, but it's like so yeah. But unfortunately, I'm trying to stay optimistic, but I got 4 episodes into Obi-Wan and I couldn't carry on.
Oh, really? I was going to bring that up. I was going to say, what did you think of the Kenobi series since you mentioned Star Wars?
Ewan McGregor, love him. He's brilliant. The reason I kind of stuck with it for 4 episodes was because he was in it and he's doing his damnedest. But I'm just, you know, in episode 1, Baby Leia gets kidnapped. Episode 2, he rescues her. Episode 3, Baby Leia gets kidnapped again. Episode 4, he rescues her again. I was like, oh, and rescues her literally like one of the flipping, I don't know, sort of howdy doody boys or whatever, where they all go underneath, And
I did think he was like trying to do an impression of Obi-Wan Kenobi.
It's like, I found it pretty, and it upset me, and I cancelled my Disney Plus subscription. But the Sons of Bitches got me back because they released that Industrial Light and Magic documentary, which is
yes, they did.
superb. And I recommend everyone to watch that. But so.
Well, I will say, like, obviously, I know different generations of kind of Star Wars fans all have like their favorite type of Star Wars, their favorite era and generation of Star Wars and stuff. So I'm in my mid-20s, and I grew up with all the kind of originals as well, but also the prequels coming out, I have kind of more of a connection to, especially Revenge of the Sith, with the relationship of Ewan McGregor and Hayden Christensen than a lot of people do. And people my age and stuff. And I think a lot of people my age were appreciating the Kenobi series more than, say, the fans of the originals were, although I do love the originals as well. I love all the Star Wars films for different reasons. But yeah, so I did enjoy the Kenobi series. I did think it was good, but I understand, I have heard lots of people like yourself being like, oh, there's this thing and this thing. And I don't know if it's just a generational thing or a connection thing,
I just thought the action was bad. Every time anything action was happening, I was just like, it started off with this Jedi being found by the Inquisitors in this bar, and he gets away from them by shooting down or dropping an awning that's about that wide in front of them all, and they just stand there going, ooh. And from that moment on, I was like, huh? Because this is, going back to the job of a director, what it is we do. One of the main things, and one of the most stressful things on a set is when a plotted piece of action that you'd figured out isn't working. It's just not working, and so you have to think on your feet, and it's the double-edged sword of the more prepared you are, the easier it is for you to change your plan. So I just know when I see something like that, I'm like, someone must have been looking at that going, why aren't they running it? What's going on? Why? We need to just come up with something to stop it. And I was just sitting there going, what? And you find I'm attached to a script that hopefully we're going to be shooting next year, and we're doing a lot of work on the script, changing it kind of in it, but in particularly the sort of acts 1 and 3 of it. But in the meat of this script, the descriptions are so well done. The action is so well meticulously written. I spoke to the producer and I said, please send my congratulations to the writer, because they've made my job really easy, because they really put a lot of work in just all the little things which as a director, when you walk on set with a script that seems like it's that it's generally going to work, but suddenly the minutia suddenly you have to figure it out, because if you don't cover yourself or you don't justify this bit of action, audiences don't buy it. They go, why isn't that happening, or why isn't he doing that? Why aren't they doing that? And you've got to kind of cover that, and that's something that a lot of people don't realize. And the best writers in the world can think about things like that, but once you're on that set physically, all those problems will present themselves to you, and you've got to fix it. So I wasn't feeling that fixing in some of those scenes and some of those escape moments. I was like,
my mate loved the Grand Inquisitor character and just loved his voice. He was walking around the flat for ages, like just doing his voice.
Well, he was cool. I thought he was
quite cool.
Yeah, I wanted to know him.
Grand Inquisitor, third sister. So yeah, in terms of like, I don't know what you're like when you're working with actors, for example, right? What sort of things are you looking for, just out of interest and out of curiosity as an actor? What sort of things are you looking for the actor to kind of bring to the shoot? Are you thinking, are you going to hopefully build that relationship up with them over time so they're ready to go on the date? Are you wanting them to kind of feel it in the moment? What kind of things as a director do you look for?
I want them to, again, it's exactly the same as me as a director. I want them to come prepared, but ready, but the more prepared they are, the more able they are to change course. Because the main thing is making sure that everyone sees the movie that you're trying to make. That's the main thing, and it's similar with actors, and same with crew and you know, people like directors of photography, for example, that I work with. Some get annoyed with me early on because I'm that kind of director. As in, I'm not going to stage this for you and then you figure out a shoot. No. I'm going to tell you what the shot is, and I'm going to do this and that. And we're gonna do all that, and it's your job to light it brilliantly and make it look amazing. You know, we would have had discussions beforehand, so it's all, you know, we're on the set, it's fine. But what really, really good director photographies do, which I've discovered through my experiences, is for the first couple of days, I'm kind of dictating the shots a lot. Like, I'm really sort of putting my foot down and going, no, I need it to be like that. After a couple of days, they will start suggesting stuff and improving it and coming up with stuff that is totally in line with the kind of movie I'm making. So, you know, for example, you know, basically they get themselves very quickly into that frame of, I know what shot you're trying to get here and I know what you want it to do, but it will work better if we do it this way. And they'll walk me through it and I'll go, you're absolutely right. That's totally what I want. But you're right. Yeah, if we use that lens and we move that way, it's going to be even better, because they know what I'm trying to get. So suddenly the collaboration just clicks, and you sort of talk, and suddenly you suddenly they're not afraid to come up to you and offer suggestions, because they know their suggestions are going to be valid. And they're also not going to be upset when I say, no, we're going to keep it this way because I'm pretty sure I need it to work this way. But I get a lot of leeway with that, because everyone knows I'm an editor, and I come at it from the cutting rooms, and so I know how I'm going to cut things together, and everyone on my sets feel pretty secure that they're working with someone that knows when they've got what they need. And it's the same with actors, because some actors will be very concerned if they haven't delivered you a take that is perfect all the way through. Other actors completely get the way it works, and that I'm like, okay, I just need that look to be on that line and not that line, and the rest of it I've got, you know, and you do things like that, and you've got to kind of just be a different director for different kinds of actors, but you figure out very quickly what kind of actors they are, and then you'll work with someone like on Miss Willoughby here, which I directed. Nice. I had Kelsey Grammer on that. Now Kelsey Grammer, I was going to
ask you about that.
Yeah, he's a man of hundreds and thousands of television hours, experienced up the wazoo. You know, nothing phases him. He's also a director himself. He totally gets it, and he will just walk on, and he gets, again, he's noticed very quickly that I was the kind of director that knew the shot, knew what I was getting, knew what I was going for, and knew when I'd got it, and never second guessed myself and didn't faff. You know, would totally get if I needed to cover my ass on something, but in general, I've got it. And he responded to that really well, and he was very happy with that. And and he's the kind of person that he'll if he feels that there's faff going on, he starts to get antsy. And I'm pretty sure he didn't get that on my set most of the time. And so that makes it. So then he brings it, and he's got the lines down. Never a problem. He walks on, lines down, everything. And he'll just ask what you have in mind. Every now and then he will say, I'd like to stay here for this moment, and like that. And usually when he would say that, he would be right. And he wouldn't be saying it just for I would say 80% of the time, he just does exactly what you want him to do.
Right.
40% of the time, he's got an idea and he'll bring it, and you know that it's genuine, because most of the time he just doesn't. He falls in line with what you want.
Yeah.
And then there was one scene where I felt the scene just ended. There was no button on the end of this scene. It was an exposition scene. He's talking to Willoughby and he's chatting away, and the scene just ended. just before we rolled, I just went up to him and I said, Kels, I said, this scene just doesn't end. I said, I need you to exit, but I need you to come up with something. Can you come up with a line or something? Because is there anything, I'm thinking this was like on my second day of directing him, so I was quite nervous. I'm thinking, oh, he's going to turn me and go, well, what the hell do you want me to say? But no, he just looked at me and went, all right, I'll come up with something, and he did, and he came in. He came up with it and walked out on this little line that everyone had to stifle themselves from laughing because it was a really fun line. And he went. And when you do stuff like that, you feel it cooking, and it's great. It elevates everything. It elevates everyone. This is the thing about film sets is it's a very symbiotic creature, a film set, and something affects something over there. And half the time, my job as a director, that's not on the creative end of it, on the more management end of it, is to make everyone on that set think everything's going hunky-dory. Even though the production's falling apart around my ears, everything's fine. And because you just can't let anything infect the set. But likewise, when you have people clicking and bringing it on, it raises everyone's game. So that's always the fun. That's the risk. Like, what's it going to be? Is it going to be one where something goes wrong, or is it going to be one where everyone has a good time? So, yeah, it's nerve-wracking, but it's kind of part of the fun of it.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. That's fascinating hearing that. And then
a very long answer to a very simple question.
That's great. No, listen, you mentioned Kelsey Grammer. That is when I was looking on IMDb and I was like, Kelsey Grammer was in this. What are some of your favourite kind of, I don't want to say moments on set because there's probably going to be so many, but like throughout your career doing these films, is there any moments that stick out working with actors that you think, wow, that was something that really I learned from or was really enlightening working on different films that you've done?
I would certainly say, I mean, it's kind of a difficult question because there's too many.
Yeah,
I mean,
I know.
every time, but I definitely learned a lot of Kelsey for sure. He in just in how he would see, and I'm all about simplifying things. I think if you watch the movies that I love, there's art in the ingenuity of the simplicity of things, and he really, there was some action that we were doing, and he straight away figured out how to just make it less faffy and simplify.
Yeah,
great. And again, you sort of you bank that. You have all those times. I shot second unit on a movie called Father Christmas is Back. And I shot quite a hefty second unit on that because they had a schedule because of the COVID issues and all that.
Right.
And they had a huge cast, and which had Kelsey in it as well, and John Cleese, Caroline Quentin, who was in my movie as well, and Elizabeth Hurley, Chris Marshall, was that kind of thing.
Cast,
yeah. And I was brought in to shoot second unit, and usually, second unit, you don't shoot with main cast all the time, but this was a different kind of thing. So I shot with John Cleese a lot, and John Cleese is an utter hero of mine. But the fun thing about that was one of my first ever jobs in the business as an assistant editor was on Fierce Creatures, which was the movie that was like the pseudo sequel to A Fish Called Wanda.
Okay.
So I'd worked on that, and as a young kid, I'd been in the presence of John Cleese on that, and we were doing all that. So I managed to say to him, "Oh, by the way, I was, as a kid, I was working on Fierce Creatures," and he's like, "Oh, right." So we had a little rapport, and I probably can't say a lot of the stuff that he said on set that made me lose my shit, laughing so hard. He's been there, done it.
Bought the t-shirt, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So, and these guys, the thing is, these guys, you can't pull the wool over these guys.
No.
They know if you know what you're doing, they sense it immediately.
Yeah.
And so for me, when you're faced with working with someone like Kelsey or someone like John Cleese, and you get the affirmation from them that they trust you, I don't think there's a feeling better than that.
Got you.
When you prove, without doing it, just doing your job, just doing it, but they you see it in their eyes.
Yeah.
Okay, this guy knows what he's doing. I mean, I'm assuming that. Maybe I'm completely wrong, deluded. If you spoke to either of them, they'd probably go, "No, he's deluded. He doesn't know."
Never worked again.
Yeah, but I've been in those situations where you're working with people and you feel that they're like questioning you and they're not sure you know what you're doing. And but when you're working with people like that who have been around the block so many flipping times, don't take fools. They don't suffer fools easily. But when you earn their respect, it's a learning experience because it affirms you. It's like, okay, no, I can be more confident with this next time because I kind of, I am right. I do know what I'm talking about, or at least I give the impression that I know what I'm talking about, which is often half the battle. So I would say if I was to say what my favorite moments where I'd go home of a day going, that
was class.
It would be when you would first encounter guys like that and see them trust you,
absolutely.
And you build a rapport with them, and you're like, okay, I'm not an idiot.
Absolutely. Probably works the same with actors as well, when like you're probably nervous working with someone that's maybe older or maybe done so much more than you, and you're thinking, oh, okay, like I really hope we have that connection on screen or on stage, and then when you do have that nice rapport, like it's always really nice. How did you break in? Like, how did it get started for you in terms of you're making films professionally now?
Yeah, well, I started off in the business. Like I left school. I'm very old, so I left school when you could leave at 16 and not do your A levels and all that. Because I had no problem. I enjoyed school very much, but I enjoyed school because of my friends, and I was the film geek and summer holidays going to the cinema and all that stuff. But I wanted to get out of that education. I wanted to get on with my life, so I was too young to go to film school. But I have a love of stage and theatre as well, and so I ended up going to Guildford and training as a stage manager, and then I worked in theatre for a year whilst trying to find my way into the film industry, because as much as I liked it, there was definitely movies that I wanted to get into. And there back in those days, there was a training scheme called the Film and Television Freelance Training. It was called FT2 for short. That if you got on that, it was a 2-year period where you were paid a minimum wage for that entire 2 years. But you were placed on professional productions as a trainee in different areas, and you in the first year you would try out lots of areas, and in the second you would specialize. I thought, because of the way my brain works and the way I watch movies, I thought camera would be my thing. So I started off working in camera, and I was the trainee on. There was a TV show called Pie in the Sky with Richard Griffiths back in the day, and back in those days, those sort of things were shot on 16mm, right? So it was all shot on film, and I'm working on this BBC detective series about a detective who's now a cook but still solves crime. But the camera crew I'm working with all worked on Superman. They all worked on Star Wars. They all worked, the focus puller knew Richard Donner and Richard Lester, both, Dickie Donner and Dickie Lester. And I'm hearing all these stories, and suddenly all that's happening. But I went into camera, then I went into the art department, and then ended up realizing that the best place to learn how to be a film director is in the cutting room, because on set, I definitely say you should have set experience. You should never walk on a set as a director having never experienced a working set. But on set, you see what the director's getting. In the cutting room, you see why the director's getting it, and you see how things come together. So, and then I realized that I loved the editing process, and boom, and then so I specialized in editing. Then I had a career after that as an assistant editor on a lot of stuff. Hence Fierce Creatures, John Cleese, and working on all these things. Had a wonderful time on a movie version of Anna Karenina that was directed by Bernard Rose with Sean Bean, and they were shooting that out in St. Petersburg, and they didn't want to use Russian labs. the production was all out in LA, but they wanted to use UK labs, so they just needed someone, a point person in the UK to deal with that and to sync up the rushes, get them, again, this was back in the day of 35mm film, get telescreen on the video would go to LA, and but you would courier the 35mm back to St. Petersburg. So I, on a few occasions, was the courier. So I would then have long weekends out in St. Petersburg, getting drunk on vodka and with the British contingent of the crew. That was one of the best jobs I ever had. Great. But you have all these fun times and all that. But then at a certain point, so I had a 6-year career as an assistant editor. And but then you have to make that move, and you decide you want to be a director. So you start getting together resources and making short films and making this, that, and the other. I ended up moving to New York for a year to try and set up a company out there, which was a wonderful experience. But the company ended up not happening. But I was out there as an editor, came back, and basically just put myself forward as a director and started directing music videos. And promos and things like that, and so I became a director that way, and then you start making short films, you start experimenting with the narrative form, and then boom, we got a ridiculously low budget together to make a horror comedy called Asylum Night, and that was really low budget, like I love it. I'm really proud of it, but I would not show it to anyone as an example of my work. But for what we did and the fun we had making it, it's a blast. But that ended up being sold to the Horror Channel in the UK. But we would take back in those days, you had the screen agencies, you had the Arts Council, you had the screen agents. Screenies took me and a bunch of filmmakers out to LA to the film market. And while we were out there, we were taken to a distributor who we had, funnily enough, targeted with this movie, Asylum Night, and they had turned it down. But when we saw them again, we were introduced to them, and we said, "Oh, by the way, we're the ones with it." And the woman that we were talking to, I forget her name, but she was lovely. And she was like, "Oh, I loved that film. I thought it was hilarious, but unfortunately, it just got voted out by the board." She said, "Wow." But if it wins anything or anything happens," and we said, "Well, funny enough, we just won the Troma Fling Award for Best Feature Film at Edinburgh," and she went, "Oh." Made a phone call, and boom, we had a distribution deal. So we went out. There's all these wonderful filmmakers and writers and that came out with us, all with these really good scripts and great stuff. But us with our silly little vampire movie were the success of that trip.
Nice.
So then that leads to you developing stuff and then it gets there and then it falls apart, and it takes years and years and years to get things off the ground, but and then in the meantime I was earning my bread and butter as an editor, and then it just happens,
it's just one thing leads to the next thing.
No, absolutely, but you've got to keep at it. It's the name of the game is stamina and patience,
consistency,
and consistency. It doesn't get delivered to you on a plate, and neither should it, because making a movie is a very expensive venture, and you've got to prove yourself to the world that you can do it before they'll start letting you do it,
and prove to yourself, so you've got that confidence.
You're
more comfortable.
Absolutely.
My neighbour has just decided to start washing his car. I don't know if you can hear that.
No, I can't. I'm good. I can't hear it.
The loudest holds ever. Before we talk about the film today, I just wondered if you knew when you first went to the cinema, if you can remember the first time you ever saw a film on the big screen, or if you have like a first favourite movie you can tell us about.
My dad took me to see Star Wars when I was, 2?
Well, the original?
Not even that. Yeah, the original Star Wars in 1977, and I was I was barely out of nappies, and I don't remember hardly anything of it except one image stuck in my head on that big screen, is that when when C-3PO is walking through the Millennium Falcon when the TIE fighters are attacking, and all the lights go off, but his lights stay on, his eyes stay on.
Nice.
In the dark. That image, seared in my head. I can still remember that. That is my very first image that stuck in my head. But obviously I had no idea what the hell was going on the rest of the time. My dad said that I wouldn't sit still and just kept wanting to go to the toilet. So, but I think the first movie that I can kind of coherently remember from start to finish in the cinema is The Empire Strikes Back.
You're so lucky. Honestly, seeing these classics at the cinema, like I've missed them,
Oh man, it was incredible. And you just saw these movies and then obviously then Raiders came out, and then I have a very fond memory of seeing Dragon Slayer in the cinema, and that it's not a brilliant film, but the dragon is the greatest thing ever. And I can remember seeing that on the screen. And again, it's one of watching this ILM documentary that's on Disney Plus. All the guys, and I've got the ILM books. From an early age, these guys are my heroes: Dennis Muir, Phil Tippett, Ken Ralston, or Richard Edlund, and so it's lovely to watch them again on this show. But you can see them doing Dragon Slayer, you see them doing all this stuff.
Yeah.
So it was, So that sort of period was it. But I think Raiders of the Lost Ark was at such a young age that I was like, there's something, it's not. Why did I enjoy this movie so much? I can't pinpoint. Obviously, I can say, I can pinpoint the moments that are so great and cool and awesome. But there's just something about it's when I couldn't figure it out in my young brain at that time. But looking back, it's the pacing of the movie, the way the movie paced, just got me. And I just remember coming out of that cinema just on cloud nine. So that was great. But then then you get older and you start to get a bit more cynical and all that. But I didn't really get that. Every time Spielberg came out with something, I was there. Every time Robert Zemeckis came out with something, I was there. Joe Dante, who is totally one of my favorite directors of all time. Everyone should watch Joe Dante's 80s movies, and Matinee being a work of genius. But you start to get a little bit, and then 1993 comes along, and this dinosaur movie comes out. Just at the time where people were like going, Spielberg's over. Spielberg's had his day. He's running out of steam now.
People are still saying that now.
I know. People need to never bet against Spielberg. He always comes back. And and at that time, people, because the last movie you'd had Always, which I really love, but it didn't do that well. And then you had Hook, which people hated at the time.
Yeah, we did that on the podcast a few weeks ago. Yeah,
did you? Yeah, people hated that at the time. Yeah. I really liked it, and I still like it. I think it needs 20 minutes cut out of it, and there will be an amazing movie in there. But a lot of people didn't like it, so everyone thought Spielberg was over. Then Jurassic Park comes out, and that weekend, this period of my life, I was. Whenever a big movie came out, I would be on, again, this is before internet, I would be on the phone to the box office of the Empire Leicester Square or the Odeon Leicester Square to try and get opening night tickets.
Yeah.
Obviously not premiere tickets, but when you'd have the premiere and then you would have the opening Friday night on late. And I would always be there. And Jurassic Park was just one of those where the entire weekend was, dinosaurs were everywhere. It was the whole country was. And again, this is a month after it came out in the States. Back in those days, things came out in the States, and then we could do look at pictures of magazines and go, "Oh my God, when's this coming to England?" And Jurassic Park, just there was an atmosphere in that cinema that I don't think I've ever experienced.
Wow.
Quite since. Everyone was up for this movie, and the reactions to the movie, and again, people forget that Jurassic Park was a bloody scary movie. Mm-hmm. It terrified people. People were leaving. People were so terrified after the T-Rex attack. They were being ushered out. It was mad. It was bedlam in the cinema, but it was wonderful. It was such an old school sort of cinema event. So that is probably my favorite ever cinema.
That's incredible.
Moment. Yeah.
Yeah, just that. But I mean, obviously in the early 90s, we've seen so much by that
Yeah,
point. But now,
exactly.
you
Yeah,
know, we've seen everything. You know,
yeah,
I brought this up a bunch of times on the podcast before, but I went to see The Matrix, right,
yeah.
at the cinema in like 2018, you know,
Mhm.
or maybe 2019. It would have been like the 20-year anniversary of it.
Yeah, yeah,
And I'm sure in 1999, this would have been absolutely revolutionary, you know, the things that you were seeing on the screen. But in 2019, we've seen all the Avengers films, we've seen
yeah.
all this and that. So I'm watching it for the first time ever on the big screen, being like, this is great. But, you
Yeah,
know, I heard that this film changed cinema in some ways, you know,
yeah.
or the way CGI's look. But anyway, so I can imagine something like Jurassic Park, Star Wars, Back to the Future, even Jaws, you know, all the way
Yeah.
in their own
Oh,
time.
yeah,
That
absolutely.
buzz would be incredible. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's a
yeah.
great one. All right, so when I asked you to pick a film, you came back with Jaws,
Yeah.
and as I said, very happy you chose this one. I've been wanting to do Jaws in the podcast for the longest time. Why Jaws? And can you remember the first time that you saw it?
There's something about it that, even though like my favorite movies, it's in that handful of best movies ever made for me. But
Yeah,
Jaws is almost a movie that I could point to and say that movie's perfect. It's perfect.
yeah,
There's nothing, and to prove it's perfect, the shark looks crap, and it doesn't matter.
yeah.
That's how perfect this movie is. And actually, the shark doesn't look crap. He only looks crap in like a couple of shots. It actually looks really good in most of the shots. But the the ridiculousness of that shark does not in any way detract from the narrative that you are engrossed in that movie, and it's down to everything jiving together. The script is fantastic. The performances are off the charts good, and Spielberg's directing, freaking 27, 28-year-old Spielberg,
Incredible, right?
just knocking it out of the park. And it's funny, you watch Jaws, and because another thing is obviously that there's obviously all the stories that the shark wouldn't work and all that stuff, and everyone says, oh, yeah, well, the reason the movie's so good is because the shark didn't work, and there is truth to that to a point. But you watch the confidence of the filmmaking in Jaws is to such an extent, particularly in hindsight, when you know Spielberg's catalog after that, and you look back on it, and you're like, no. Even if that shark worked, yeah, we'd probably have different shots. We'd have more shark, probably.
Right.
He if the shark was taking over, he knew what he was doing, and the shark would have, not working meant that it forced his hand in some things, but he was a student of Hitchcock. The whole idea of the camera being the shark, he would have done that. I don't believe for a second he would have done that. All that stuff, it would have all happened. And
kind of goes back to what you were saying earlier on about if something's going wrong on set, it's about how you deal with that, right? And you kind of move,
yeah, exactly. And you adapt it in a way that still makes the movie you're trying to make. And that's what it is. I mean, the shoot was hell, and we all know that, and we've all heard the stories. And Spielberg himself still says he has palpitations when he thinks about
nightmares
the filming of that movie. So it was hell, but you watch it, and this is this kid at the time. I believe him to be the most naturally gifted filmmaker of all time, because he just makes the most complex things seem effortless. And you look at Jaws, and people can look at Jaws and go, well, it's not quite as flashily shot as some of his later movies. And I'm like, yeah, but you look at how he's hanging on those master shots without cutting. He's got all the confidence in the world that he knows what he's doing. And you got that scene on the car barge where Brody's going over to get the kids, but the mayor and the coroner turn up in the car, and they basically grill him and say, no, it wasn't a shark, it was a boat. And it's a very important scene, but it's an exposition scene, all done in one shot, a locked off camera on that barge. All that's moving is the background as the barge is going, and then the whole thing plays out. And even to the point that Brody and Murray Hamilton, the mayor, they end up in a 2-shot close up. They come to the camera, and the staging is all happening on this static shot, and it blows my mind every time I watch it. And another one, the exposition scene where when Hooper's got scared by the face in the boat and he drops the shark tooth, and then they're talking with the mayor again with the sign, the Amity sign, where someone's painted help shark. One shot, the entire scene, one shot, this master that starts off as a normal kind of 3-shot, and then he starts moving, and as they start moving, the camera comes down really low to get the sign behind him, and suddenly you're looking at these guys, and it all ends, and it's one of my favorite things. They all, like Roy Scheider and Murray Hamilton, leave the shot, and you just end with Richard Dreyfuss's head just at the bottom of the frame, and he just starts laughing. Goes, and he's just this little head.
That's right.
It's so well composed. It blows my mind, and that is a film. That's not a filmmaker that's just shooting whatever the hell he can and hoping the hell this is going to work. He's crafting this thing right from the start, and those are the things that I point to say, look at this stuff. This is this kind of filmmaking has always worked and will always work. It will always. It's always the thing. You create. I'm an editor, so I'm. To me, it's all filmmaking is all about juxtaposition. Not cutting when you don't need to cut, and then cutting the hell out of it when you need to, and that creates moments. But the thing about those masters, especially expositional masters that hold, he does the same thing in Raiders when Brody comes to Harrison Ford's house to tell him they want you to go for it, and he starts packing. You don't realize it. It's a one shot. Cameron comes through the door, but the thing about those masters that hold is metaphorically, and I think sometimes actually physically, you as an audience member, you're leaning in. You're being drawn in. It's such a powerful thing, and most people don't even notice what it's doing, but when it's clicking, it's working. And so I use those sort of things as example when I'm talking to people about filmmaking and young people about filmmaking. I'm like, look at this stuff. This stuff is this is classic filmmaking, and it won't ever go away.
It's like when you don't notice as the viewer, you don't notice when the camera's cutting or not cutting, I love shots in Jaws where it feels like at least 90% of the film, at some point in the background or whatever, you see the water. So it's a constant reminder that it's out there. Not the fact the shark's out there, but the water itself is this big threat. And you're constantly reminded that Brody doesn't like the water, and he's not gonna, he stays away from it as much as possible and stuff. And then when he's forced to kind of go out there and trying to save his town, that's when you relate to him the most. And the idea, what kind of drew me to Jaws when I was younger is the idea of being stuck out there is first of all terrifying, but also when you're on the boat with two other people that you don't really like and you don't really know, and they're all arguing and bickering and stuff, but they come together at the key moments to save each other's lives, but also to help people around them to get rid of the shark and stuff. And that the kind of camaraderie of the three of them is what made me kind of fall in love with the film, not the shark. And I remember watching it as a young guy being like, I want to see the shark. I want to see the shark. I want to see the shark. And it's not until now I'm looking back at that time going, you don't see the shark as often as you remember seeing it because it wasn't working. But the genius of him is that you don't need to see it as much, and it still brings you in as a film. Yeah. Even though you're not seeing the shark, and it's like that anticipation, that tension that's building. The underwater shots are brilliant. The amazing score, the way it's shot, the lighting and stuff like that.
Those shots that are right on the
it's still. I've seen Jaws more than any other film ever in my life. Maybe that and Star Wars. But still to this day, that where the camera's on the water, it still freaks me out because it's like you never know what's going to happen, even though I know what the next shot's going to be.
Fear. That's the fear when you're in the water and you can't see below the surface, right? And that's what it's deliberate. He knew exactly what he was doing with that, and it's fantastic.
Yeah, I was on holiday back in August. Yeah, late August. We were in Gran Canaria, and I was in the Atlantic Ocean, and I was swimming in the ocean. And we went on this boat trip and stuff. It took you out to this kind of part away from everything else. There was no signal on your phone and no Wi-Fi or anything like that. I was like, this is the start of a horror movie, right? This is the start of Jaws 5. Yep. And I'm in the water and I'm swimming and stuff. And then because I'd made that joke, this is like Jaws 5. I'm now thinking about Jaws. And I'm in the water going, you never know what's underneath here.
Yeah. There's so many, that's the thing about Jaws. There's so many things about it in terms of its effect on pop culture, its effect on scaring the hell out of people. And you watch Jaws now and it's apart from the head coming out the bottom of the boat, the Ben Gardner head, which still scares the hell out of people.
Absolutely, I still jump everything.
Yeah, saw it in IMAX a couple of weeks ago, and everyone jumped. And it is more of a it's more of a adventure movie. It's got John Williams goes into pirate mode when he's when they're sea shanties and when they're chasing the barrels. It's pirate music playing.
Absolutely.
That's the tone of the film is, to me, I think it changed the tone of tentpole movies, or what we refer to now as tentpole movies, and it showed that you can combine the horror and adventure, character drama, and kind of give we moan these days about studios wanting to make movies everything for everybody, and they end up being nothing to nobody. Jaws showed you how to do that, how to almost combine genres and bring the audience in thinking they're going to get this kind of movie. Everyone went to Jaws thinking they were going to see a scary movie, and they got that scary movie.
Yeah,
they got so much more. And that's the thing, is they didn't expect. I don't think people who went in to see Jaws expected the movie to draw them in.
Be one of the greatest of all time. Yeah,
as much as it did, and that's what blew it up. So it became this cultural phenomenon, and also if you think about it, I think the year before, 1974, Jaws came out in 75. The big movie that year was The Towering Inferno, I think, and I showed that to Megs the other day. I was like, "You've got to watch this. This is so this is pre-Star Wars, pre all of that, but just watch it." And even to this day, that movie is spectacular as hell. It's big and it's grand, it's all that. But these days, you look at the big movie, and if you look at the big Avengers movie or whatever the hell else it came out, and they think the only way to outdo that this year is just to add more, make it more of a spectacle. Whereas if you think there, you had Terror Inferno, which was one of the most spectacular movies ever made to this day, and then the next year, Jaws. Now, Jaws is what you would call a commercial tentpole movie, but it's not big and grand. It gives you the entertainment in a different way, and that's it's a different type of movie. It's not the same movie but bigger. It's a different movie, and it pulled people in through the strength of its filmmaking and its characters, and it's just showed you that people went to see the shark and they fell in love with the three guys.
Yeah,
they went to see the shark, and to me, Jaws becomes one of the funniest films ever made the moment Richard Dreyfuss steps on screen.
Absolutely,
I think the comedy is absolutely incredible.
Crushing the little cup in his hand.
That's just incredible. And to this day, and even in the cinema, everyone, for some reason, everyone cracks up when he brings the wine and Brody's pouring wine, and he goes, "You might want to let that breathe." Nothing. That moment, everyone cracks up every single time I see it, and it's just he just brings an energy to the movie at that point when it needs it, and it turns it into almost a buddy movie. So you've got this kind of horror movie in the first act, and then it becomes this buddy movie, and then it becomes an adventure.
An adventure, I was going to say. Yeah.
And but all the while, the characters are what it's all about. The relationships between
that's what it is.
The police chief and the town officials, the police chief and his wife, the police chief and Brody
and his kids.
And his kids, that wonderful scene where the kid's copying him.
He's copying him,
yeah. And the relationship that builds between him and Hooper, and then Quint comes into the occasion.
Just mixes it all up,
mixes it all up, and then they're all stuck together on this thing, and all the while it's about their relationships whilst you're watching this adventure film play out, and it's not until you look back and you understand how all those mechanics are working that it's breathtaking. It's very good, because that's how films should work. Films should just play out. It's like, it's interesting, at the beginning of this, you said as a director, you must watch movies differently, and kind of, but really, if the movie's working, I don't. The movie's
You're
working,
a film fan.
I'm watching the movie. Yeah.
Yeah.
Then I'll look back and I'll go, Christ, I've got to look under the hood of this and see what's going on. But if the movie's working, no, I'm drawn in. It's like watching Jaws for the first time again, and you're just going on this perfectly paced, wonderful, character-driven thing that's just going out, and it feels so right the way it all works. You know, it just all fits into place.
Yeah.
And I just think Jaws is the ultimate example of that.
The scene where Hooper goes down in the cage and he goes under the water and he goes, he's getting the goggles on and he goes, I got no spit.
Yeah.
I remember being a kid, like not understanding what he's talking about. And I said to my dad, I was like, why, that's such a random thing to say. And my dad had to explain to me, he's like, it's because he's nervous.
Yeah.
And I don't know what it was. It was a moment in my kind of film fandom, I'm still really young at the time, that kind of made that click for me, that the fact that these are real people that we're watching.
Yeah.
You know, you see the shark, you see this big thing, the shark's killing these innocent people and stuff, and the big explosion at the end and stuff. But you're forgetting, like, if this was real, this is exactly what would happen. You know, and that's what I think makes it so great as well. You know,
you can't overemphasize the importance of those little moments that just that make it real for you. That give the movie the verisimilitude, that make you again go, holy shit, I'd be like that.
And it's even like the shot where it zooms in on Brody's face. What do you call that? There's a name for that.
The reverse dolly zoom.
The reverse dolly, yeah. So when it comes in, although it's a film device, you know, that has been used by the director and the filmmakers about that, but even still, the kind of way that it makes the shot look, that makes your kind of brain all fuzzy and plays with your eyes and stuff like that, you know, in moments of panic that we all have in life, you know, we can relate to that, you know, that he's had that realization, like, oh my God, this has happened.
The feeling of the ground dropping from beneath you, which is what when you have a moment like that of, you know, and this is probably more extreme than any of us have ever experienced. I don't think any of us have seen a kid eaten alive by a great guy. And but it really, it brings that in. And again, it's an old technique. Hitchcock did it, but Spielberg. I don't know if anyone had ever done it on a close up of someone's face.
Yeah,
and it just it's just incredible. And he did it, but he does it. I always like to point out to people the wonderful reverse dolly zoom he does in E.T. that no one ever really notices, but it's a shot over the brow of the hill with the town, and the and the houses are like, just, you're like, what's going on? Because the houses are like going back, but you're just walking over this hill, and then all the guys come into foreground, and the keys. The guy with the keys comes in the foreground, and then you focus on the keys, and we're reverse dolly zooming back because all the houses start coming towards us.
Oh wow!
It's brilliant. It's absolutely brilliant.
Yeah. When I rewatch Jaws now, like, I don't get scared, but there's still that feeling in your tummy, you know, like something's about to happen. The thrill of it, you know. Obviously, when the head comes out of the boat underwater, that's the big jump scare, right?
Yeah.
But even when, you know, before, we're going to need a bigger boat, or you're going to need a bigger boat, that's obviously a big one when the shark appears, when he's getting fed. But when they're in the pond and the guy's on the boat and he's shouting at the kids, and then you get that shot from above and you see the shark under the water.
Yeah,
there was something really, really interesting about that and I couldn't stop watching that scene when I was wee, because I was like, not only do you see the shark, but the shark's not out of the water yet. No. We're looking under the water and we can see what it would look like from that angle. And I just thought that's one of the best pieces of filmmaking in the entire film.
Yeah, it's incredible, because that's your first shot, really, of the shark.
The size of it,
and it's underwater, so that's how you would see it in real life, right? If you were there, you know, if you're looking through the water at it. But it just, again, but it's a tease. But it's your first time seeing it, and again, I think after, you know, because we know the film Barry's, you've seen it so many times, you forget. Like when I show it to people who've never seen it, because believe it or not, there are people on this planet who haven't seen Jaws, and I have to rectify that very quickly when I find out. But always get a reaction. They always, when you see the shark with its open mouth just gliding under the water, everyone goes, "Ugh!" You know, because it really is. It's incredible.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's one of the examples where the shark looks incredible.
Yeah.
you know, and looks so real,
yeah.
you know.
Yeah. It looks like a shark underwater. It looks, like exactly what it is.
Yeah.
And then that all gets topped off with a nice juicy bitten off leg floating to the bottom.
Absolutely. What about, and there's that documentary, The Shark Isn't Working, they say that like people were like leaving the cinema and like vomiting when they saw because they'd never seen anything like this before. You know, and the other bit is when Quint, spoiler, when Quint gets eaten in half, and the blood kind of comes out his mouth and stuff. Just an amazing visual that really sticks in my head all the time. When not only is the death of Quint so traumatizing, but how long it takes. Like there's no, I mean, obviously there's cuts, but we sit there and we watch him be eaten by the shark. You know, it's not like, oh, that's him away. Like you see it happen.
Yeah, we see it happen, and the panic on his face and the screams, and Robert Shaw, it's horrific. And but again, what, like, as a kid you watch that and it's horrific, and you're like, oh my god, this man's being eaten like that. When you get a little bit older and you understand the real dread he has after listening to the Indianapolis speech, when you add that into that, and suddenly you're like, oh my god, this is, he went through all that, and that he has that has seared in his memory, and this is his worst nightmare happening. This isn't something that's like, oh, I guess this is the way I'm going to die. No, this is his worst nightmare happening. And when you look at the way Robert Shaw is screaming in that scene, you feel that. And I think when you get a little bit older and you make that connection between those two moments, it's doubly horrific.
It's like that wee moment before the shark finally kind of connects with him, like, and he's kind of kicking at it, isn't he? And he's like, like, because like that's the tough guy, the tough persona of him disappears in that moment.
He's panicking. Yeah, he's like a little kid panicking, just trying to kick it away.
And then of course the worst thing happens. Absolutely. We should mention, before we finish up here, we should mention about the Indianapolis kind of speech. Some people say it's some of the best sort of delivery of lines in a story in film history. I never appreciated it when I was younger because, I want to see the shark and I want to see the, these moments and stuff. But it's when you become an actor and you're watching it and you're just engrossed so many times at the same story. You know what he's going to say. You can read about the story if you want on Google, but it's the way that he brings it,
Literally, no. I mean, I dread to think how many times I've watched it, and literally, it never, ever, ever doesn't engross me. There's never a temptation to go, "Oh, fast forward this bit because I've seen it. I know what he's going to say." No, it's magnetic.
Yeah,
and it's one of those. Again, it's a film where through all the pain that they went through to make it, everything just. The movie gods smiled on this movie, and not only made it a kick-ass movie with wonderful performances, but it also, on top of it, gives it that moment as well, which just elevates the whole movie. And it's incredible, and you can't you can't diminish the reaction. Roy Scheider and Richard Dreyfuss, the looks on their faces during all this it's fantastic. They're selling the hell out of that scene as well. They're doing nothing, but Robert Shaw just doing that, which
brilliant.
Scene that was written, I believe Spielberg maintains that it was written by Cole Gottlieb, and then and then was rewritten by Howard Sackler, and then was rewritten by John Milius, and then Robert Shaw rewrote what John Milius wrote. So it's like went down the line, and there's all these. That's what Spielberg, I think, maintains. But but whatever, however it came about, and whatever got Robert Shaw to that,
to get to that stage,
to make that happen, it goes down in history. It's fantastic, and you just got that eerie John Williams strings just going along underneath it. It's chilling.
Yeah, absolutely. I always end the conversations about the movie that we're chatting about to ask you what your favorite bit of the film is, because the Good Bit podcast, what's your favorite bit of the film? But there's so many great moments throughout the film that I love, and we've talked about them here and stuff like that. But I also think another reason that makes the film so great and perfect, as you say, is that elation on Brody's face at the end when the shark is done. Smile, you son of a. And it's kind of all these epic moments in the film building to this one moment. you know, where he shoots them and stuff. And it's obviously the music adds to it, and the way shots add to it, and the kind of build up to it, and the amount of times he misses with a gun and stuff like that. It's all build up on purpose, obviously. But after everything we see, for the peak to be that last shot of him, the elation that we feel, the relief that we feel matches his.
The most amazing elation of a
brilliant
of a character ever. You cheer with him. It's
absolutely
incredible. Yeah.
And the kind of peaceful like swim back after it, you know, when I kind of holding that thing. It's just so funny. What's your favorite bit of the film, or what do you think is the best part of Jaws? I know it's the hardest question ever.
It is a very hard question, but I would, if I had to choose, it for me, it's the first barrel attack. To me, it's just and you know, I suppose we should mention John Williams, because it's also, because I'm very into movie music. I compose myself in that. So and it's all, to me, it's all part of the tapestry.
Right.
And everyone who thinks that the Jaws score is great because of two notes are completely mad, because those two notes are two of the greatest notes in music history. But there's so much more to the score.
It's just two notes.
I know.
It's crazy, right?
But when you know, we're going to need a bigger boat, and the music swells, and suddenly we are introduced to, we see the shark go by. We're introduced to the full version of the shark theme with the and it just becomes so dramatic. And then we go into action mode, and the fugue music kicks in. And to me,
it's on.
It's on, and that whole sequence is incredible. And I do believe that John Williams kicked down the door of the greatest period of film scoring ever with that cue, because up until then you'd see, like, you know, people had done it, and John Barry had certainly done it in Bond movies, but the idea of having motifs that are laid in the early part of a score to then all come together in one track, which they do in that action cue. So you're watching the boat, you're watching these amazing characters that you've fallen in love with, and you're watching them reacting mostly hilariously to this situation. It's very funny the way they're talking. You know, Hooper's trying to take pictures, and he wants Brody in the foreground.
Beautiful.
And it's just hilarious. But it's pounding, and you've got the Amity theme coming in, you've got the shark theme coming in, you've got the Out to Sea shanty theme coming in. They're all coming in, and basically it's like, to me, it's the junction point of the movie, and it's where the tone shifts. And for me, that whole sequence, from that moment, from we're going to 20 to 24 to 25, from that moment to the barrel going down is perfection for me.
Absolutely, movie magic.
It is movie magic. And so with all the amazing stuff that's in the movie, if you put a gun to my head, that's probably my favorite part.
Yeah. If you put a gun to a barrel, I was trying to find a transition there, it didn't work. No, absolutely. I mean, we're going to need to end the show, but we could talk about Jaws over and over again. And I'd actually would be interested to get you on to chat about the sequels as well. I don't know how you feel about them.
No, I have thoughts.
So we can maybe do that in the future.
I know them very well.
What else is coming up for you that we can chat about? Have you got things in the pipeline, and where can people find you on the socials?
I'm on Facebook and Instagram. I'm not big on the socials. I post every now and then, but I'm about. You'll be able to find me. I've just been finished. Well, I shot a movie at the end of last year, an action movie. In fact, the Siege. Right there.
Very nice.
With my lead actor Daniel Stisson, who's a sort of an on the rise action star, and it's a full on action movie. It's an old school action movie, that hopefully will get a decent release. So hopefully you'll be able to check it out. Like, you get it's weird because the film gets delivered and handed over, and other people in rooms chat about what to do with it, and you're like, well, just let me know, yeah.
Right, okay.
Give me a heads up.
Cool. Well, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate you coming on.
It's been
And
great.
I'd love to have you back on for George too. That'd be really good.
Happily.
Yeah. Thanks for watching and listening, everybody, to this episode of the Good Bit Podcast. Please let us know what you think, and we'll catch you all down the road.
Citizens